Welcome to the SwineTime podcast here at Pipestone. I'm your host, Spencer Wayne. I'm one of the staff veterinarians, one of the owners and partners in Pipestone Holdings. And normally I get to do my job of going out and working with farmers, but they let me do this one fun thing, which is host this podcast. And not that the other stuff's not fun, but this is the most fun. And I get to have guests on to tell us things that are interesting to learn. A lot of times it's people that work with us within the company, but we often have guests from outside the company. And that's today. We have a special guest, and I always say that every guest is special, but our guest today is somebody that actually was one of my partners here at Pipestone for a while. He's changed his life, and he's moved on to different things in a different country, but he's a world expert, internationally known. I would say he's the most famous Venezuelan veterinarian in the world, right? I don't know. I haven't said who he is. I haven't introduced him yet. Paul Cano. I'll stop rambling and let you introduce yourself. And we'll get on to the topic after that. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Spencer. It's quite a privilege to be part of your podcast. I get to listen when I go to farms every so often. So thanks a lot for the invitation. Yeah, I'm a veterinarian originally from Venezuela. Did my PhD in Minnesota. Then I worked for BI, for PIC, and then I got the luxury to work and be part of a Pipestone family. By no question, the best production system and vet clinic in the world. So happy to have done that. And then in the last 2 years, we decided to take a family change. So I came with my 2 children and my wife, Maria Jose. She's still professor at ISU, and we both have a practice here in Spain and do swine work with producers.
Thank you. And JP is also a friend for a long time. Paul was a grad student when I was a grad student, roughly the same time at the University of Minnesota, as well as your wife was. And it was always unfair. We always felt it was unfair because you and your wife, very attractive people, you were almost a professional athlete, and then we would look at each other and say, it's not fair. They're too good looking. They're too talented, make us all look bad. But I've known you for a long time, and I know you won't go along with that stuff, but very talented person. Great leader, have done a lot of interesting things. So I'm glad you're here. And we'll get on to the topic. To kind of set the stage a little bit, I'm in Minnesota recording. You are in Spain, Barcelona area, close to Barcelona. We're going to talk about African swine fever and a current situation that is affecting your immediate area around Barcelona or close to Barcelona. I'll describe it, JP. You fill in the blanks and the details. But ASF it's a virus that affects pigs, only pigs, that we know of anyway. It's a very big virus. It's not simple. Some viruses are tiny. This is a jumbo virus that has a lot of complexity to it. It's hard to make a good vaccine for it. And when a pig gets it, they die. They essentially hemorrhage. A lot of their organs inside will hemorrhage. And it's not 100% fatal, but it's a high fatality rate. It's trying to force its way west through wild pigs predominantly. These wild boars will migrate around and you'll spread it through them. They tend to get infected, sick, die, also live long enough to travel a little bit further. When they die, other pigs eat them, get infected. It transmits through the blood.
Just to make that point, it's a very tough virus, right? It can last for weeks in fresh pork, for months in cured meats, and for years in frozen pork. So it is an extremely hard virus that can survive so long that pigs can get infected.
Yeah. That's why, I got a sausage, it's been smoked. Yeah, it's still infectious. You can't process the food enough to make it safe, and it'll live for a long time versus PRRS, for example, is hardy in its own way, but if the conditions are on a nice dry surface, if you have it in food, it has a limited shelf life. I won't get into what it is, but it doesn't last months. It lasts hours, days, something like that. Much, much shorter. It's a more fragile virus compared to this ASF, which is super tough. So I'll stop and just let you describe what's happened, what's happening now, and give some context to the discussion.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. I live close to Barcelona, and it's in the northeast of the country. And on November 25th, 2 wild boars that were found dead, they tested positive, PCR positive for African swine fever virus. So in a country that hadn't had ASF for quite a while, and that was a big change, right, for the industry. A little bit of context. Spain had ASF in the 70s and finally got to eliminate the disease in 1994. So from 1994 to to last November, Spain didn't have ASF. If we remember, by 2007, ASF was limited to Africa, right? It was living in wild boars in Africa and maybe infecting some domestic pigs, but it was limited to the continent. And then in 2007, potentially with a sheep crew, it moved to Georgia, the former Soviet Union country. And then from Georgia, it moved west and east, all the way to China and a lot of countries in Asia, and all the way to even Germany or Belgium in the Western European community. So it has spread a lot in the last 18 years since it got out of Africa.
And you said, it sounded like you said sheep crew, but do you mean like a cruise ship, like the food?
Yeah, I hope you have subtitles for my accent. So it's a boat, okay. And the people working in that boat, they boarded in Africa and took some food with them.
Okay.
And then, of course, we know that this virus is very resistant in meat. And then that garbage from that boat, from that ship, was taken to some backyard pigs, and that started the infection in Europe.
Okay. And that was, you said 2007, and that's the strain that's now spread through Asia, that's spread through into Eastern Europe. And also, just for a little local context, is it the Dominican Republic? Is that part of the same transmission? All from spreading from that likely? I don't know if we can say that or not, but is that accurate?
Likely, yes. And there are some debates on some of the strains that have been found. But in general, we could say that all the field viruses that are circulating in the world today are originated from that group in general.
Okay. With this recent introduction, it was, can you describe the setting? I mean, you didn't have any in Spain. It wasn't even at a Spanish border country at that point, correct? And so it ends up in Spain it's like a park area, some kind of a wild area, like a state park that had a wild pig population in it, and it was found.
Absolutely. A little bit of context, if you want, before Spencer. Spain has about 2.6 million sows, and some of them, like 300,000 or 400,000, will be like Iberian pigs for specialty cuts or ham that is very famous. The rest, 2.3, 2.4 million sows, are just commercial, white normal pigs. The most important production regions are the northeast, where I am, Catalonia and Aragon, those two autonomous communities, and then the southeast with Murcia, then the southwest with Extremadura, Andalusia, and then around the capital city of Madrid, there are some clusters of production. So four main regions. Barcelona, where we are right now, is a big city close to the ocean, and then mountains on the back of the city to the west. And in one of the state parks that is surrounding the city, that's where the initial detection was made. Just a fact that the College of Veterinary Medicine of the University of Barcelona is located in that park, in that area, right? So very close to the detection of the virus. So it's an extension of a wood area that is coincidentally bordered by three major highways, 3 to 6 lanes, and that means that those highways are fenced for security, for protection of vehicles. So that puts a very interesting barrier in that area that is very hard for animals to enter or leave that park. Of course, you can go on bridges or tunnels, but those have been taken care of. But for the most part, the park is surrounded by urban areas and fenced highways, so it's a very limited space. There are some small populations of domestic pigs. So think about the perimeter was defined as 6 kilometers around that first detection, with some second ring of 20 kilometers. If we talk in miles, it will be like almost 3 miles for the inner circle, the high risk ring, and then about 14 miles for the bigger ring, protection ring. In that whole extension, you have a few farms, domestic pig farms, but in the small and in the high risk area, there's only 3 small farms that are located in that region.
Okay, so you're kind of describing what to me sounds like an interstate roadway system here, where you've got the road, but then you've got a fence on flanking the interstate. Wildlife can get over it. Deer can jump over it. Pigs could probably get through it, but it is kind of a barrier that is special right here, where normal roadways don't have that kind of barrier. And there's 3 highways, so you made like a little magic triangle of woods right in the middle of this, where this was found. Is there a good theory of how it got in?
Well, there's an investigation that is ongoing, right, by the Department of Agriculture and all the animal health authorities. And keep in mind that in Europe you have 3 levels of authority, right? You have the European level, the federal Spain level, and then the autonomous community level. That's almost like your state level. And so there's ongoing investigations. But the 5 main hypotheses that have been considered include the first one that was discussed was food waste, right? Think about a driver of a truck that we have several coming from Eastern Europe, right? Like all Eastern Europe is positive for ASF, and they market that meat. They make sausages and cure meats and all that with that meat. So think about a driver that came and ate his sandwich and then throw the rest of the sandwich in a garbage can at night. The wild boars, this is a highly populated area of wild boars. They haven't been hunted for quite some time, so the population is, I would say, was out of control. So you'll think about it, the wild boars just playing with the garbage, eating that sausage, and then starting the infection. As we know, the virus can be viable for many months even in processed meat. So that is a possibility. That's number one. One of those highways that we mentioned, Spencer, is very important to connect all Spain from the south all the way to France, and then connecting with the rest of Europe. So it's a plausible hypothesis. It could have happened. Number 2 hypothesis or thought was, well, maybe just migrating boars, right? Wild boars from Eastern Europe have been moving. Germany has been kind of suffering from that. Wild boars have been displacing west and getting infected. The problem is that France, which is a big country in between Spain and the rest of Europe, hasn't reported any positive wild boars, even with all the testing that has been done. So it is hard to believe that it came to Spain without being detected in France. The third hypothesis will be like what happened in Belgium. If you remember, some hunting lodge bought 40 or 50 wild boars for hunting, and they were brought from I don't know what country to Belgium. They luckily detected it very quick, euthanized all the animals, and controlled the outbreak. In this case, there aren't any hunting lodges in this area, and there isn't any event of transport in those times. The other one could be bioterrorism. It's been mentioned, right? So somebody trying to harm the industry or the continent, who knows? And the last one that has been very discussed is the leak from a research lab. So very close to the detection area. And there is a lab from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, from the research institute called CRESA, which is the local research institute on the Department of Agriculture. And they do research with ASF vaccines. It is an extremely professional group of people. Facilities are, number one or very well-designed facilities. Processes are well done. The biosecurity audit didn't offer any, lights on what could have happened. Everything seemed to be working fine. There isn't any indication that could have been leaked. But having said that, it'll be very hard to ignore that the strain that was detected is very similar to the original 2007 strain. Mm-hmm. And if you look at all the strains that are circulating in Asia, in the Dominican Republic, or in the rest of Europe, they have changed as virus change, right? Over time, they move from the original strain, and this one is kind of a step back, very close to the 2007 Georgia detection. So that, which is used in research, right? Because it was the first one. So that gives you, a lot of concerns about could it have been an accident or not? So those are the 5 hypotheses. Judge is still out. So
okay, so no smoking gun yet that shows you where. So what do? You got these wild pigs living in this state park that's kind of triangled in from some 3 major highway systems. Do you turn loose a bunch of sharpshooters that kill all the boars? Do you poison them? What? I know that wasn't as simple as that. There was something different. But how would you even control it? How do you control it? And what are you doing to get rid of it?
very good point. I mean, I didn't know anything about hunting or especially wild boars. So you would imagine, yes, let's send 2,000 people there and just sweep the area and kill everything that moves. But if you look at previous experiences, especially in Europe, wild boars are extremely smart. They really learn, the things that are at risk for them. And what had happened in other areas is that if you start hunting a group that is concentrated and they move together, let's say 40 or 30 animals, they will spread and split in 3 or 4 or 5 migrating groups. They will, go to another location. Now 3 or 4 or 5 focuses. So what the European Union has tried to do more recently is try to do an outside-inside approach, is going from the outer ring, try to limit the possibilities of, migrations, so the boars cannot leave. And what they have done here is being sure that those fences that are in the highways work. They have installed barriers. For some weeks, you could see police patrols or military patrols in the bridges and tunnels. So they were taking care of those exit points. And then after that, they installed some barriers that cars can pass, but cattle or pigs can't. They have tried to limit that effect, right? Meanwhile, or in parallel, what they have done is an intensive search of dead, wild boars, so trying to find carcasses and testing all of them, removing and disinfecting from the area. And they have also started doing specific hunting, right? So I'm trying to sacrifice animals in specific locations, even without using conventional guns, but more like a silencer kind of guns that don't make noise, and using a lot of traps. So they bait the pigs, and then they have traps to try to get as many of a group as they can, and then go with hunters around that group to sacrifice the animals. So that's what they have been trying to do so far. They report that they have either found dead or euthanized about 700 boars. Out of those, about 64 have tested PCR positive, and only 2 of them have tested ELISA positive. So they think that the infection was pretty recent. They found some dead animals before November, or that had been dead before November 25th, and they were PCR positive. So they estimated that ASF entered that park between the end of October and mid-November. That's the window of opportunity that they are looking at. Okay,
so it's not universally more deadly. Some animals can recover, but not many, because you get the ELISA positives walking around, and so there is a small survivor percentage, but it is really deadly. Pigs tend to die, and so I'm kind of listening. I'm wondering, could you just steadily hunt and trap them until you exterminate the entire population? Is that the plan? Just keep working on it until there's no more pigs left? Is that it? Or how do you deal with this long term? They have to go away.
Right, that's the plan, is being sure that you don't take any pigs, domestic pigs, out of this area. You don't take any domestic pigs in this area. You try to limit the possibilities of migration of wild boars in the 6 kilometers, and then in the 20 kilometers, you increase your hunting or capturing activities in the 20 kilometers radius inside, going from outside to inside. And then, yes, you try to reduce the population as much as you can. They estimated that in the whole area there were about 900 boars. So if those 700 boars number is right, then we should be close to be done with that population. But it's a big area, it's very woody, and with a lot of suburban areas. So it's hard, but that's what they're trying.
Okay, so that leads into whole different part of the discussion. Which you described what happened and kind of where it's going. But when that happened, you lost a huge chunk of your export market. And for comparison, you said Spain has 2.6 million sows, and I looked the numbers up. Something like you export close to half of your production, close to that. In relative context, relation to that, the U.S. has a little over 6 million, something a little over double what Spain has, and we export about 30%. So both countries, I think, similarly sized, similar sophistication, type 3 site production. I would say it's very similar between the two countries, and we are highly dependent on our export market. If we were 50%, it'd be even more intense. Take us into how that was affected. When you get ASF, then immediately you can't export pork, and every Spanish citizen now has to eat twice as much pork to make it the same value because the demand immediately drops because you have the same supply for half the consumers. Is that accurate? Or how do you describe what happened economically to the farmers at that point?
Yeah, that's very close to what has been happening, Spencer. For a little bit of context, and Spain has done the meat side, the pork side, very well. They have developed a very competitive pork industry or further process industry. So the Spanish pork is well recognized and in many places. And I don't know, politics or diplomacy plus a little bit of quality, etc. Spain is able to position their pork in more than 60 countries around the world. So it's a very well diversified market. Keep in mind that the main market is Europe, right? So all the other 26 members of the European Union, they buy pork, most of them, from Spain. And they have done that very well. Think about, when ASF hit China and China needed more pork, that same, further process and packing plant industry grew a lot in Spain. So that has been, a process of learning the international trade and positioning specific cuts of pork in every country, etc. So it's a very well developed and positioned industry. In the last 2 years, because of high virulence PRRS, there have been a shortage of hogs to packing plants. So producers had enjoyed 2 to 2.5 years of extremely high margins, I would say 50 euros per pig in the last 2.5 years. So very well, rewarded producers. They are, most of them, in a very good financial position. They have been growing, and packing plants grew so much that they still need more pork. So they don't satisfy that need. When ASF hit late November, the price was about 135 euros per kilo. Just for a reference, €1.35. And we had been at 170 a couple months ago, right?
Okay.
So after that time, the next day, of course, price dropped. And by now, a few weeks later, we are about €1 per kilo. So the reduction has been about 35% of the price from before the detection to after the detection. What happened, or how does it work? In Spain, there is a commission called Mercolleda that is a three-party meeting or board that joins or groups the producers, a representation of producers, a representation of the packing plants, and the government is like the referee, being sure that the rules that were agreed on are in compliance, right? And then producers offer how many pigs they have and what weight in general as an industry. And then packing plants offer how much pork they have in their freezers, how much pork they need. So they agree to a price. And that price is very well respected. Of course, always you have some, incentives or some penalties, but that price is a reference from Spain. What happened in December was that this board, this body that meets every week on Thursdays, and they met twice in the same week, which is a novelty, to take price down. And they can't reduce more than 6 cents per week. They took like 20 cents down on the price in 1 week. And the objective was very clear and very aligned between packing plants and producers. Let's preserve the markets as much as we can. So let's move the pigs, let's move pork, and let's preserve the markets, and then we'll recover in the next months, right? So you had 3 kinds of clients. One, those that didn't have any complaints, mostly European countries that are obligated to accept regionalization. So they would buy pork from other regions, not those 20 kilometers that I'm talking about, right? Then you have other countries that had a specific request, South Korea, China, etc. China, for example, asked Spain to increase the control rings. In European Union regulation, the control ring is 3 kilometers for the inner circle and 6 kilometers or 10 kilometers for the outer circle. China asked that to double that to 6 and 20, right? And they were able to take pork from the other, counties and states provinces that were not affected. So you had that second category of countries that, okay, I'll buy pork from the other regions if you satisfy these needs. And then you had another group of countries that said, no pork for me, like Japan, Mexico, etc. They said, at this point, I want to see what happens. I'm not comfortable buying pork from Spain. So that was a reduction, but not a complete shutdown of exports.
Yeah, and so that's interesting to know, because I didn't know if you lost all the exports, but no, you didn't. You lost some, and that reduced the price because now that you stopped the demand, at least from some countries, because they wouldn't buy anymore. And you have, it sounds like a super control system of packer and producer setting price. And so there's a kind of a limited drop potential week to week. You had regionalization to compartmentalize where ASF was and was not. And you had agreements with European countries based on that regionalization, so that let's say France wants to buy some Spanish pork. They look and say, well, just make sure it doesn't come from around Barcelona, and they give you stipulation. You say, no, these pigs all were grown up in Western Spain. And so that satisfied them, so they continue to buy. And so you didn't have a huge pileup of pork there that nobody would buy. You were able to move it. Okay, so should move into a little bit of describing the U.S., and you lived here long enough. You tell me where maybe I'm wrong. And for our listeners, you I don't know if you knew much about Spain, but in the U.S. we have a new program that's been a pilot program for several years, and it's called the U.S. SHIP program, U.S. Swine Health Improvement Program. It's based on a program called NPIP, National Poultry Improvement Program, and that was similar to what we've got with this U.S. SHIP in that it defines some health standards, some biosecurity standards, and it's built to present a unified front of standards that are respected by people buying your pork, other countries buying your pork, where they would say, oh, okay, these farms are in a secure spot, I'll continue to buy U.S. pork. And so this program is now officially in the hands of the USDA. It's done with its pilot stage. But we have secure pork supply, which many producers have gone through and certified their farms. If they keep regular movement records in some kind of a system like AgView or ABAP, that's the second piece. And then they have to register and become certified based on those two things being present with their state Board of Health or Board of Animal Health or Board of Agriculture. It's administered at the state level. We're trying to do what you did in maybe a more formal way, where a U.S. producer could say, hey, I'm part of this program. I'm all certified. I've got good biosecurity. I've mapped my farm out. I've got description that's known by the state, and I record my animal movements. And then they are on the list of people that can continue to sell pork in the event that something like this would happen. If Joel Niram were here, one of my partners, he would describe it better. But that's what we have. We're trying to do that. Because if we had an ASF outbreak here, currently we have nothing. I mean, we would just be like sitting ducks. If we had that happen, we would lose all of our export markets probably immediately, for a while at least. And how do you dig out of that? We would have to eat 30% more pork in this country, or get rid of 30% of our sows. It would be ugly, really ugly for a while. And also, we have it at the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean. It's very close to us here. The Spanish experience is a good illustration of the potential dangers of what would happen to us, because it's not like it's thousands and thousands of miles away. It's however far the DR is from the U.S., 100 miles, I don't know, something like that. It's close. So listeners, beware. This is not something that's an abstract thought from a different country. It's at our doorstep, and how would we respond? So I'll stop rambling there.
No, absolutely, Spencer. I was still working in the U.S. when U.S. SHIP was kind of developed. Kudos to Dr. Main for pushing, initially all the process, and kudos to everybody that jumped in and said, yeah, that makes sense. We need to work on this direction all together, the industry. this will be good for everybody. And now with USDA kind of managing the program, I think that will give a lot of international credibility to the program. So I'm absolutely convinced that that is a great mechanism to sustain international trade in the event of a CSF, ASF, FMD outbreak. One point that you mentioned before when you were rephrasing all the Spanish situation is regionalization, right? One of the weaknesses of U.S. is that not only production, but packing is very concentrated. So depending on where you get hit or where the first and later detections are reported, it could be very damaging for the industry because let's say Iowa or Nebraska, or there are some areas where you lose a lot of packing capacity, or Minnesota in a bit, right? So if you can develop programs like US Ship and get those more specific or fine-tuned regionalizations accepted by those purchasing countries, then you'll have an advantage because then you can sustain the industry. That's what's happening here. There's only one packing plant in that proximity of the 20 kilometers. Even if the province of Barcelona, which is pretty big, and there's a lot of production in that area and some packing plants, even if the country wouldn't accept from the province of Barcelona, there's a lot of packing capacity in other regions, and they have been able to accept pigs from those provinces and all the regions. So I think that's the key, is regionalization and gaining the trust of your clients internationally. That's major. If you can do that, then the industry can survive.
Yeah, and I'd say here it's going to rely on, this is a voluntary program, so it'll rely on producers saying, I want to be part of this. The USDA being practical-minded and administering it, what they have to monitor for if we're going to do any testing. This program is developing. It's not finished, but you can sign up now. It is evolving and developing. And then the third piece is the packer will have to, they don't want to be the policeman, is my understanding, but they have to protect their product. And so the compartmentalization, it's going to get hard here versus what you got in Barcelona. We've got several plants very close together with a huge spider web of activity crisscrossing each other. A producer will send to 3 different plants, and it's not like you only sell to the local plant. You sell to several plants, and those pigs will travel distances and crisscross paths with other pigs. So that will be a challenge here for sure, because it's not so regionally compartmentalized. It's a lot of crossover, but that'd be our challenge. Having said all that, I would be remiss in my duties as the host and as a veterinarian here to not mention this U.S. Ship program. It's got several websites. If you type in U.S. Ship MN for Minnesota or Iowa or whatever, you'll go to a state webpage. There's a national webpage, a national website where you can enroll. It'll ask you your address, your name, your Prem ID number, and you will then officially be enrolled. And so the enrollment is kind of step 3. First is track your movements with the system, and prior to that is have the SPS plan in place. So many producers are already there. A final step is just enroll. You can be part of it right now, and that gets you fully up to speed where if we had an ASF outbreak, you would be at the front edge of getting to ship pigs, be part of a controlled movement program. You should enroll. That's the message I would have to producers. Otherwise, we're going to be stranded. If we have an ASF outbreak, we will find ourselves with no export market because we have no platform to give anybody else confidence in our production. I think I said that right. I like it when I have guests here at the table because I cannot talk. I can let them talk. So I had to ramble there for a bit. Apologies to the listeners. Any parting thoughts, JP, on what you would say, words of wisdom or from this experience in Spain that we could learn from here?
Well, too soon to tell, right? What worked, what didn't work. I think that early detection is important. Also, every effort that can be put in together to assure early detection, even in pig farms or in wild animals, is very important. Transparency is very important. So the industry stayed together because initially there was very good communication and transparent communication. And then all the pre-work that had been done in terms of containment plans, testing abilities, biosecurity plans, and exports with all those purchasing countries paid off. So it's still too soon to say what happened, what was the magnitude of the impact. But so far, those are good experiences that happened in Spain.
I'm thankful for JP being part of this. He offers a great local insight into what happened in Spain and a good description of it. Thanks, JP. I appreciate it. Thanks to our listeners, too.
Thanks again, Spencer. I just want to say that I fully agree with Dr. Yaros that this great podcast deserves some advertisement. Think about it. Today, we could have been sponsored by, Spanish chorizo or Iberian jamon. That'll be a good sponsor for this podcast today.
All right. We'll look for the checks coming in. I got to see when we get the checks for that Spanish chorizo and jamon iberico. Hey, thank you, JP. I appreciate you being a guest on. The SwineTime podcast was created for the pork industry and individual pork producers around the country. Hosted by me, Dr. Spencer Wayne with Pipestone Veterinary Services, the podcast contains pork industry news, advancements in animal care, and how to enhance your productivity. Find the SwineTime podcast at www.swineTime.com.